that is going on throughout April, which is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. It is being put on by the Dakota County Sexual Assault Response Team. My name is Jenna, and I'm a member of that team. We've been doing this training to just kind of provide some information and education on what the different people and systems that interact with victim survivors, what our role is in sexual assault cases and response. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to our presenters, who are Officer Emily Bears and Detective Kelly Coughlin, who have graciously agreed to do this for us. So Emily, go ahead and take it away.
All right. So sexual assault response for law enforcement. If it will click forward. No, we just tested it. Aha, there we go. All right, so here's some fun facts about Lakewood PD. I don't know how fun they are, but there they are for you. Now we have 62 sworn officers and then about 25 reserve officers, 18 civilian employees, and we're the 10th largest city in Minnesota right now. Like she said, I'm Officer Emily Bears. I've been with Lakewood PD for 3 years. I have a background as in EMS and as a dispatcher and rescue, and then I'm a member of the mental health team here at Lakewood PD. So just to note that responses to CSCs is going to differ between jurisdictions because of policy and size and stuff like that. So this is made for Lakeville PD, how we respond to things. So we try to keep it pretty general, but just keep in mind that this is not concrete. These are just some guidelines and how we do it here at Lakeville PD. So we broke it up into stages because there's different types of sexual assaults in regards to timeline, in progress, recent, and then past action. So reporting in progress sexual assaults, 911 will get the call, they'll dispatch us, and generally EMS is started as well. We need to determine if the suspect is still on scene and make sure that he or she is detained when we get there. And we need to make sure that that scene is completely secure of where the assault took place. We're going to meet with the victim and assess injuries. The victim may decline medical attention, but we do really want to encourage at least a SANE exam for evidentiary purposes. They can choose whether to go by ambulance or personal vehicle. It's going to be very important for us to go with them to the hospital. In regards to securing the scene, once it's all secure, crime scene unit begins the evidence collection and taking photographs and stuff like that. And then while we're still on scene, we do contact our detectives and they will respond out to the scene. So like I said, you accompany the victim to the hospital, to keep that, relationship going. And when we get there, the medical treatment is the priority. So if you're not able to get a statement from the victim, not a huge deal. You have to make sure that the victim is okay first, and then work with the SANE nurse to obtain a statement later. Try to determine the level of charges and report it to officers back on scene. It's not super important, but it'll help them for booking into Dakota County Jail if there is PC to arrest. So reporting recent sexual assaults. So it's typically going to be a 911 call to dispatch. They'll dispatch officers out. Generally, people are calling from their homes. On occasion, they may do a walk into the police department or just want a phone call from an officer, but we do try to meet with them face to face. Depending on how recent it was, we may want to start EMS to the scene just in case there are some injuries they need looked at, things like that. So it's kind of what you think or what the victim wants if they want EMS. We're going to determine if the suspect is there with the victim for victim safety, and generally suspect's there, we don't want to take a statement from the victim and the suspect's sitting right next to him. If no medical attention is needed, we're going to take a recorded statement from the victim. Make sure to identify the suspect fully if you're able to, where he is, contact information, and then determine if there's evidence to be collected based on the statement. So we're for recent sexual assaults, we're talking within like the last week, maybe week and a half as recent for us. There may be sheets that haven't been washed or clothing that hasn't been washed, from the assault. And then within 10 days, we do try to encourage that SANE exam because that'll still be a thing that you can do because 10 days from the assault is generally the time frame. Sometimes they have electronic evidence we want to collect, maybe text messages. We've run into Snapchat videos quite a bit recently of the actual assault that's posted by the suspect to their account. So we want to grab that and stuff. And then we want to connect to an advocate if the victim allows it, but we really try to encourage it, because once the interaction with the police is done, they're going to be having another conversation with a detective, but it's important for them to feel supported and supported by, somebody else, because once I get there, I get their statement and I leave and I'm done. That victims need somebody to be there with them to continue through the process, because it could be quite traumatic for them. Have a safety plan in place. Does the victim live with the suspect? Does the suspect have access to the home, like a key or, garage code? Can they stay with a different family member? Just try to keep that stuff in mind. So when you leave the scene, you're not leaving the victim there with the suspect to be victimized again. And then for us, we forward these cases to investigations, and they will do the follow-up, usually more detailed statements and contacting suspects and stuff. Generally for Lakewood Pd on patrol here, we do not contact the suspect. We leave that up to investigations because they can decide, how they want to go about that. We just do the identification, we put in our report, and then we notify. For past action sexual assaults, at least at Lakewood Pd, we've been getting a lot of these. They can be several years ago or from when they were a kid. We're just getting a lot more of these types of these reports, and they can come from mandated reporters too, teachers and therapists and things like that for children. So for us at Lakewood Pd, typically they're going to be walk-ins to the police department. They just walk in and want to talk to an officer, or they just want a phone call from an officer. We do try to encourage the victim to meet with us face to face. It's very important, at least for me, for getting a statement. We have our body cam footage, to get their reactions, and if they're trying to demonstrate something, can really help capture the entire statement instead of trying to explain in your report how they looked or how they were demonstrating things. That statement is going to be recorded, and we're going to get as much information on the suspect as possible. They can be very vague. We've had one where, 10 years ago, my neighbor kid sexually assaulted me. His first name is Nick, and that's all I know. He doesn't live there anymore. That's all you got, put it in there, but we try to be as specific as possible. And we want to attempt to narrow that timeline of when this occurred and where it occurred. And if there's multiple locations, let's say the sexual assault started at the victim's home, continued in the car ride to the suspect's home, or to the suspect's home, you want to make sure that you really try to get those locations nailed down and get that timeline of when this occurred, not just the year, but try to get the month or the, try to really narrow it down. Rarely requires evidence collection. If the person was a kid at the time, 10 years ago, we're not going to have any forensic evidence that we can collect usually, except maybe electronic communications, possibly, text messages, social media, you might get some of that. Connect to advocate with victim permission. We always try to push that, so they have somebody to go through the process with, and then we forward these cases to investigations. Yeah. And then for mandatory reporters, we get some of these once in a while, and mandatory reporters can be all the way from in progress CSCs to recent, all the way to really past action. So teachers, therapists, medical examiners. So some of these may be reported straight to our investigations unit, with reports being forwarded or faxed over, the mandated reporter forms, or just faxed directly to them. However, on occasion, we will get a teacher that's calling 911 saying, hey, I got an email from a student, this is what they're saying. If there's a sexual assault in progress, obviously we will go to the scene to make sure that the person is okay, and do the evidence gathering, the same thing that we would do before. Otherwise, if it's past action and it's a child or vulnerable adult, we as patrol officers, unless we're specially trained, we cannot interview those people. We'll just have to gather all the information and then forward to investigations. We have a few forensic interviewers here at our PD that are able to do those type of interviews, because we as patrol officers are not. We also, in our policy, I'm sure many policies now, in regards to notifying parents of juveniles, let's say the juvenile comes in and reports something, you know, you run into the sticky situation of, do you call their parents? Do you not call their parents? Typically, we just talk to a supervisor about the, you know, the facts of the case. Let's say a juvenile comes in and he's sexually assaulted by mom. Okay, we generally don't, you know, probably not a good idea to call mom and be like, hey, your kid just came in and said that you sexually assaulted him. Dad, you may not want to go to dad, you know, because the dad will warn mom. It's just very complicated. So we'll typically talk to a supervisor about, you know, their opinion, and then we'll just call investigations. But as long as they're safe at the moment, contacting parents and guardians may come later, not at the time of the report, just to keep the child safe and just to help investigations with, you know, how they go about things. We don't want to tip off the suspect or something and ruin their investigation. So the initial contact with the victims, it's really important to be victim-centered and trauma-informed. Things that, you know, sometimes patrol officers, me included, have been, you know, we like to interrupt. It's just something that we do. You know, person's telling their statement, you interrupt to ask a question or to get more details about that particular thing, or, you know, you ask questions that are almost kind of leading, like, you know, did he touch your butt? Or, you know, I mean, and then say yes or no. We try not to do that in any recorded statements. If the victim wants to talk, you just let them talk and let them finish. And then if you have follow-up questions, do that at the very end. It's really important with these types of victims that you don't interrupt. Do your absolute best and just let them talk. If you have questions, ask them at the end. Remember the policies regarding jurisdictions for CSCs. The laws have changed recently. Before, my first question to sexual assault victims is, where did this occur? What city were you in? Because if, let's say it was Burnsville, I'd be like, all right, gotta call Burnsville PD, have a nice day. Now, victims can report it to any law enforcement agency. That agency needs, and generally it's going to be the suspect's agency, the location of the crime, or the victims, but technically by law they can report it to any jurisdiction that they wish. That jurisdiction is responsible for taking the initial information, putting it into a report, and then it will get forwarded to the correct jurisdiction for the follow-up of the facts. So the jurisdiction that it's reported in, if it didn't occur there, it's not their responsibility to investigate that crime, but they do have to do a report and forward it on. Identify basic information like we do in every case: who, what, when, where, why. Different for juveniles and vulnerable adults. Like I said, forensic interviewers need to be used in those cases. Our patrol officers, most of us are not trained. So we just get basic info. We don't talk to the child or the vulnerable adult, and we forward it to INV. Reminder that more detailed statements will come later. So let's say the victim just talks and talks and talks. You get the statement, you ask a few follow-up questions. It may still seem vague to you, but for patrol, at least at Lakewood PD, it's not the patrol officer's responsibility to get the most detailed statement ever. We generally let the victims know that they will be getting a phone call or a follow-up from a detective from the investigations unit, and then they will generally get another statement and will be much more specific about what happened. For patrol, for us, we just get the basics and get what we can and ask our questions, but it's not our responsibility to get the most detailed thing ever. Offer the option to connect with an advocate. We always do that. We don't want them to feel alone. Talking to law enforcement can be pretty intimidating, and it's generally pretty traumatic. When I show up, I ask what happened. You have to relive that, and then I just leave. So try to get them in contact with somebody so they're not alone through the process. And then if there's PC for arrest, especially for recent, you know, within the last few days, if we have PC to arrest as patrol officers, even without the formal investigation concluding, we'll issue the cops alert, you know, to hold or detain or, you know, arrest and bring them back to Lakeville so we can do the actual investigation and interview the suspect and stuff. And then we generally pull the criminal history for the alleged suspect, and then we'll attach that to our initial report to give to investigations. So safety planning is really important. like I said before, you don't want to leave the scene and then the victim is re-victimized. So there's just some things you have to think about that you might want to ask the victim to ensure that when you leave there, they're going to be okay and not going to be retaliated against. Because that would be awful if you had to go back there because, you know, they were raped again because you didn't ask these questions. So does the suspect still have contact with them? Does the suspect know that they are reporting it to law enforcement? Are there any current protective orders in place? Any additional safety measures in place? That can include putting up security cameras or changing the locks, things like that. And do they need emergency shelter? We work with 360 communities to do our best to get them that emergency shelter. We'll coordinate for them because that can be a hassle to victims to do it on their own. So generally, while we're on scene, we'll contact 360s while on scene if they want emergency shelter, and then we'll try to make those arrangements. And then following the initial report, there will be a cross report for child protection or adult protection, depending on what the case is. We're going to forward it to investigations for follow-up, and then we're going to contact 360 if the victim gives permission. We do this on domestics too. We just let them know what happened, and 360 will follow up with them if they weren't talked to while on the scene. So that's basically it for patrol, at least for Lakeville. Does anybody have any follow-up or questions or anything? Great, that's what I like to hear. All right, I'll turn it over to Detective Coughlin here.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Emily. You did a great job there. My name is Kelly Coughlin. I'm a detective with Lakeville. I've been with Lakeville for 23 years. And for the first 11 years of my career, I was patrol officer. And so for the past 12, I've been in investigations. For the most part, I've been the only female back in here in investigations. And so I have been one that usually gets most of the crimes against women and children. So I do have a bit of experience investigating these types of crimes. I'm also trained to be a forensic interview, and Officer Bears did touch on that as well, being a forensic interviewer, interviewing children a specific way, so we don't lead them or put words in their mouth. And as you can imagine, trying to get a child to explain to you what happened to them is very difficult. So we are trained to use anatomical diagrams and dolls and stuff to help them tell us their story. All right, so here we go. All right, so a sexual assault has been forwarded to investigation. So now what? What do I do? Again, when it comes back to me, I want to be very victim-centered. I want to make sure that the victim is okay with everything I'm about to do. I really try to keep them informed about the process and what I'm going to do and make sure that they're okay with everything. And if they're not okay with something, that's okay. I want them to know that it's okay for them to tell me that as well. So I really try to do what the victim wants us to do. So then I also try to coordinate, and I have to coordinate with possibly child protection, get workers involved with me, child protection workers, if children are involved, especially if it's within the family. Adult protection, I sometimes have to coordinate with them as well. And then also coordinating with 360's communities. And then I need to look at that interview. Was the interview completed by patrol, or is that something that I need to still do? Do that forensic interview if needed, or do a secondary interview just to get a little bit more information so we have complete information. So I need to kind of look to see what I have, what the report says, and then kind of go from there. I need to determine what are my next steps. Okay, so for a recent sexual assault, I need to start thinking about, like, if I get called in, if it's a recent one, that crime scene. Crime scenes can be anywhere. I've had crime scenes at hotels, at residences, on park benches, in gas station bathrooms. I mean, cars, these crime scenes can be anywhere. So I need to start thinking, where's my evidence going to be and what evidence am I going to try to obtain? Again, it's photos, clothing, bedding, swabs, thinking about victim and suspect. What are the evidence that I'm going to want to try to get? And again, utilize our crime scene unit to help get some of that evidence. And they're specifically trained to, swab for DNA and collect that evidence for me. And again, if it hasn't already been done, encourage that victim to get a SANE exam. I need to start thinking about warrants, because I can't just go and take things. I have to think about what's my link, what do I need, what can I get. Something new is, to us anyway, I know it's been done many times before, like it's sometimes in the bigger metropolitan communities. However, thinking about a SANE exam for the suspect. What DNA can I get off that suspect if it's a recent sexual assault? Very important to get done now. I have to constantly be strategizing. Is it important to interview the suspect now, or should I wait? First and foremost, we want to make sure that victim is safe, obviously. But then strategizing. Should I wait till some of that evidence comes back before I approach that suspect, or should I go interview that suspect now? Warrants for electronic data, social media. I can't even tell you how important that is nowadays. So much communication we're able to retrieve off of Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook. So much necessary evidence is obtained that way. And again, what other warrants? What might I need? Do I need a warrant to go into somebody's house to obtain that bedding, to obtain that clothing? For example, if the suspect lives with the victim, they have a right to privacy in that home. I can't just go in there, even though it's the victim's home too, and start collecting all that evidence. That suspect still has a right to privacy in their own home, and I need to get a warrant to be able to go back in and obtain that stuff. So I need to start thinking, like, what do I need to obtain all this evidence to prove a crime? All right, what I also need to do for a recent sexual assault is any follow-up, talk to witnesses. Witnesses could be maybe somebody the victim told what happened to them prior to telling the police. Talk to that witness that way. Maybe it's their friend, their parent, something like that, a teacher. I've interviewed paramedics before. So you just don't know where a case might lead you to and who you have to talk to. Review body cam footage. It's so important nowadays to do this, because me included, I have to review my body cam footage when I do interviews too, because you're trying to actively listen to that victim, but you're also trying to think of maybe your next question. So sometimes you miss important things that are said to you. So you want to go back and review that body cam footage or your audio statement to make sure that something wasn't missed. That's very important. I want to obtain that sexual assault kit if it's still at the hospital, and I want to get it to the BCA to prepare for analysis. And then prepare any other evidence. Start thinking about like the swabs of the bedding or swabbing of the clothing, getting that prepared to get sent to the BCA for analysis, for DNA analysis. Again, staying up with victim communication. I utilize 360s all the time. My advocate, Heather, here at the station with us, I can't tell you how much I rely on her and how wonderful it is to have her here, because as I'm trying to organize a case, sometimes it moves so quickly. Like there's so many moving parts. Sometimes I can't reach out to a victim and they need to be reached out to. So I will be like, Heather, I'm like, hey, I need help. I need you to call her and I need you to say A, B, C, D. She's like on it. So it is so important and it's so wonderful that we have this relationship with 360s to help us with situations like this. And again, talking with 360s, what other additional services does this victim need? And again, they help us help them with, excuse me, with that. And again, updating the victim as appropriate. Sometimes we try to update them as much as possible, but sometimes we can't tell them everything depending on what the situation may be with their case. But again, we try to keep them up to date as much as possible. Safety planning. Do they need an OP, an HRO? Something again, coordinating with 360s, it's a lifesaver that they're able to step in and help us with that victim if that's something that this victim needs. All right, past sexual assaults. It's a little harder for evidence collection, but it still can be done. Again, talking to witnesses, that's very important. Obtaining any medical records. Maybe they saw a medical professional like a couple years ago. It would be very important to get that medical documentation. Again, what kind of electronic or social media platforms do I maybe need to reach out to and write a warrant to get some information to help prove a crime? And again, speaking with that suspect, again, when is the best time? A lot of strategizing. Again, same things to coordinate with 360s. They help us a lot and help keep that victim kind of up to date and help them with what they need. All right. One more thing I wanted to mention about the HROs and the OFPs is that, again, first and foremost, we want the victim to be safe. However, sometimes we coordinate with the victim that if they're safe, sometimes we hold off on them submitting that OFP or that HRO to the courts because once that gets submitted, the suspect knows right away. They'll get a copy of it. They'll kind of like the element of surprise is over for us, and we really, really want that as law enforcement sometimes with that suspect. It's less time for them to think about what they're going to say or plan what they're going to say. So again, we really coordinate with the victim on that and with the help of 360s to see if we can wait just a few days and the victim will stay safe until it's the right time to submit that OFP or that HRO. Once the cases are done, to the point where we submit them then to the county attorney for review, a couple things can happen is that I might get notified by an attorney and say, hey, I need you to complete some follow-up, do A, B, C, D, and I will get that done for them. Maybe something I missed. And then they formal complaint will either be issued or maybe an arrest warrant for the suspect as well. Or we'll get a declination memo where charges will be told will be declined. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Do you guys have any questions? Emily's still in the room here, so in case you have any questions, we can try to answer them for you. Oh, yes. Sometimes we get anonymous SANE kits. I just had a point here to bring up. So a victim will go in and they'll have a SANE kit done, and we will get notified that there was a kit done, and we will then collect that kit and we will keep it. And it's really up to the victim. The victim can come forward at any time. It's up to them when they feel comfortable, if they ever want to come forward, that we still have, you know, that evidence. It'll, you know, we'll be able to retain that evidence even if they want it anonymous in the beginning. Right. Any questions?
Any questions? You can type them into the chat, or if you're comfortable, you could unmute and ask, whatever works. Okay. Well,
I just wanted to say one more thing. Again, I just wanted to thank Heather from 360s as well for helping helping us get this PowerPoint. As you can imagine, Officer Bears and I have been a little busy the past couple weeks here, kind of swamped. So I can't thank her enough for kind of helping us out here with this PowerPoint. So I just wanted to have that shout out as well.
absolutely. Huge thank you to Heather and Kelly and Emily. Thank you both. You did an amazing job. Really appreciate it. Thank everyone for coming today. We also are recording this, so we will be able to pass that along to you once all of the training sessions are completed. So if no one has anything further, then I think that's that.